Hello, and welcome back to the Hearsay podcast, a joint project between Pro Bono Students Canada, University of Calgary chapter, and CJSW 90.9 FM. This is a podcast where University of Calgary law students discuss a variety of legal topics with a plethora of professionals in the field. We'd like to emphasize that the information you hear today is legal information and not legal advice, as we are law students and not lawyers. This podcast is purely for informational purposes. If you do require legal advice, please consult a lawyer, as there is no substitute for a professional. My name is Dylan Clark, and I'll be your host for this episode. Today, we will be speaking about AI facial recognition technology in the legal field with Dr. Gideon Christian. Dr. Christian is a professor at the University of Calgary. His areas of study include artificial intelligence in law, electronic discovery law, environmental impacts of new technology, and algorithmic bias of AI technology in the Canadian criminal justice system. In 2023, he was awarded a grant by the Office of the Privacy Commissioner Contributions Program for the purposes of conducting research into complex issues surrounding private sector development and the deployment of AI-based facial recognition technology in Canada. Additionally, he holds a seat on the Calgary Police Commission's Technology Committee, where he helps to draft bias-free guidelines. This is part one of a two-part series with Professor Christian. Today's episode will be a general discussion on AI facial recognition technology in the legal field, while part two will be a deep dive into the emerging deployment of facial recognition technology in the retail industry. In the spirit of reconciliation, we would first like to acknowledge that Hearsay is recorded on Treaty 7 territory. We would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. I would also like to note that the University of Calgary is situated on the land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River, and that the traditional Blackfoot name of this place is Mohkinstsis, which we now call the City of Calgary. You're listening to the Hearsay Podcast on CJSW 90.9 FM. I think it's safe to say that as AI technology continues to develop, specifically facial recognition technology, the implications of this technology are becoming more and more vast. But before we dive into some of those implications in the legal field, I was hoping that you could provide our listeners with just a high-level overview as to what AI facial recognition technology is.
Okay, thanks for having me on your podcast today. So, with regards to facial recognition technology, a basic, I'll probably say basic understanding or definition of facial recognition technology is that it's an aspect of artificial intelligence technology, or it's an AI-based biometric technology that uses computer vision to analyze and identify individuals based on their unique facial characteristics. So what facial recognition technology simply does is to analyze the facial image of an individual. It develops a biometric template of that particular individual face or that particular image. And that image, based on the unique facial feature of that biometric template, it's able to match individuals or an individual to the biometric information.
So then, bringing this back to the legal discussion, what implications might this technology have in the legal field?
There are many implications this emerging technology may have in the legal field. Of course, facial recognition is about identity. It's about identification, matching an individual to an image or an image in a database. So let us take, for example, in the context of criminal law, where conviction is based on identification, which of course links an individual to a crime. So this is a technology that can be used to link an individual to a particular crime, in the sense of, matching their image with probably a CCTV image of the crime scene. So that establishes the identity and thus links the individual to that particular crime, which could make a difference between exoneration and conviction. In the criminal justice context, this is a technology that could be used to convict or exonerate an accused person. And here, of course, we are talking about charter right. Now, that is one area. Other areas where this technology could have implication in the legal field, it's when it comes to issues such as bias and privacy. Now, talking about bias, of course, we talk about racial bias and gender bias. And existing literature out there, there are existing literatures out there, a lot of them, which shows that facial recognition technology has disproportionate impact on individuals from particular segments of the society, mainly individuals of color, and also other individuals based on their gender, the female gender. So whereas this technology has high accuracy rate in identifying white male faces, the accuracy rate in that identification drops when it comes to individuals from darker skin colors and also gender. So what is the implication of this? The implication is, of course, by now, it's evidence that there might be implication of racial bias with regards to the use of this technology, especially where facial identification is related to obtaining or denial of a benefit. So that means if you are a white individual, there is 99% chances that you will not be denied those benefits on the basis of facial recognition technology. Whereas if you are a darker skinned female, then your chances of obtaining that benefit where it is based on facial recognition basically drops. So in effect, the technology is discriminatory on the basis of race and gender. And that has, of course, charter right implication because the charter, of course, prohibits discrimination on many bases, of course, including race and gender. Then you also have privacy. Privacy is also another implication because right to privacy is a charter right or a right that is enshrined in the charter. And facial recognition technology, it's based on biometric information. Biometric information are personal information of individuals because they are unique to such individuals. So when it comes to obtaining such biometric information, as well as even data that is used to train the technology, there are lots of a series of privacy issues that are implicated. So in a nutshell, these are just some few implications that this technology may have in the legal field.
Sure, and that's incredibly interesting. I'm hoping that we can touch a little bit more on a few of those areas within this podcast today. I think what I'm most curious about is, and you just mentioned some of the training data that they use to build some of these programs, and especially with some of the implicit bias that's inherent in these programs for people of color. Is it as simple as just being able to have a broader base for the training data in order to help try and eliminate some of this inherent bias? Because I'm curious, and you say that 99% accuracy for white males. So then why is there such a high error rate for people of color?
For many reasons, one of which, of course, you have highlighted, diversity in terms of the data used to train the technology. So the fact is that the facial recognition industry is a white male-dominated industry. Now, let us be very clear that the developers of this technology did not go out deliberately to develop the technology to be discriminatory against individuals from particular gender or from particular race. Of course, that implication or that impact arises from the data used to train it. When you have a group of individuals from a particular racial gender group sitting at the table designing this technology, you will expect them to design a technology that reflects their background. And which is the problem here? The lack of diversity in this field is to some extent responsible for the problem we're having today, why the technology reflects the image of its maker, which is predominantly white male. So dealing with this problem, of course, requires having that diversity in the table when it comes to designing this technology, right? And that's one, but that's not the only issue, because knowledge about the racial impact of this technology, I think at the initial stage of the development of this technology was lacking. I do remember of course, cases where you have even individuals from minority group who were responsible in designing this technology at the earliest stage. Even the technology they designed were also biased against individuals from their own racial group, right? And that was because at this initial stage, the designers of this technology were not really knowledgeable, or they were ignorant of the racial implication or the racial bias arising from this technology. That might be said at the initial stage when this technology is being developed, but we have reached that stage of the development of this technology where the issue of racial bias is no one designing this technology can rightly claim to be ignorant of these issues of racial and gender bias, because the literatures are out there. I mean, you have clear evidence, even from the operation of this technology, that had made this, bias very clear. So that knowledge is there now. I think the next thing, of course, now is for the developers of this technology to bear that in mind when they are designing this technology. So having diversity on the table, ensuring that the data used to train this technology accurately represents the society or the group where the technology is to be deployed is also another important aspect of being able to address the issue we have just highlighted.
All right. And I guess just sort of going back to a little bit more from your work on this, what inspired you to write so much about AI, facial recognition technology in different sectors? Why is this important to you?
Coming across real life experiences in the news, as well as research, which kind of were highlighting, the impact of this technology on individuals from racial group, which I belong to. The more I continue to research on this racial bias, the more evidence out there I continue to uncover, which highlighted the adverse impact this technology is having on people from minority community. So that kind of, propelled my research in that area. And recently, what my research basically does is to kind of highlight this racial bias issue so that those who are responsible for designing this technology know that, okay, here is a problem that we really need to take into consideration when we are designing this technology.
Okay. And so I guess and you can do as much as you can for, writing these articles and highlighting these issues and making sure that people are well aware of the problems that are part of it. But I'm wondering what role you think that the government can or should play in regulating or legislating this technology so that we might be able to avoid some of the inherent issues and problems with the use of it as it stands today?
When it comes to regulation of artificial intelligence technology, I have always been of the position that government it's not really the best regulator of technology like artificial intelligence technology. And for many reasons, artificial intelligence technology is a technology that moves at the speed of light. Those are not the kind of technology, or this is not the kind of technology that can be regulated by a government that is based on a system that is inherently bureaucratic. If that were to happen, we have a situation currently with ADA, which is the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act that has been in the works for many years now. And it has been, while it was still in the works, it hasn't even seen the light of the day. We've seen how far artificial intelligence technology has moved. When the idea about ADA was proposed, there was no generative AI. Today we have generative AI, and ADA hasn't even come into effect yet. So government doesn't have that speed, or government bureaucracy it's not really consistent with the speed and flexibility that is needed to regulate AI technology. So I think when it comes to regulation of AI technology, that is something that is best handled by maybe an independent professional body that will be very flexible, in regulating the technology. That is not really, that the regulatory process is not really kind of intertwined with bureaucracy that will basically stifle ability to be able to regulate the technology. So I think the government involvement in this case would probably be, okay, let us set up, a sort of regulatory body or a professional body that will be charged with the responsibility of addressing this issue, and then give them that power to be able to do it. And that of course, body should be composed of, both individuals from the industry, from government, but let it just kind of have that independence to be able to move at a speed that reflect the technology they are regulating or they will be regulating.
Right. And so I guess I'm curious then, given that it seems, like you say, very difficult for the government to really play a super active role in the control of this, do you think that maybe is a reason why it's become maybe a problem in some of the use of government agencies? And I want to ask you how much this is affected in Canada. But for example, in the US, I know that there was the case of Randall Reed that I came across in some of my research where, he was arrested for committing a crime that happened in a state that he had never even been to before, just simply because he looked like the person who had actually committed these crimes, at least, based on his facial recognition. But upon a close look, it was pretty clear that it wasn't him. And I know that that was based off of a contract that the local sheriff's department had used with Clearview AI. And I'm curious, are there any instances of local law enforcement in Canada using these facial recognition programs in order to help with their investigations? And is that even legal to use in Canada?
Well, Randall Reed case is not an isolated case. I think there are 6 cases in the US, 6 documented cases in the US so far. And that, of course, highlights the racial bias issue we are talking about, because all these 6 documented cases in the US, they are all individuals of Black race. So, and that kind of makes you wonder if there are research out there which shows that this particular technology sucks when it comes to identifying individuals from this particular racial group. Commonsensically, should a police department be deploying that technology in seeking to identify individuals from that same racial group where it has been shown, or that technology has been shown to have very high error rates in identifying those individuals? So that is a problem, a very serious problem that, this is something that could be addressed by common sense. Another good example, which of course boggles one's mind, is the case of Portia Woodruff, the woman who was, I think, 7 months pregnant, who was arrested for carjacking. Even if facial recognition technology matches her face to the individual, which of course led to the issuance of the arrest warrant, when the police officers showed up at her house and looked at this woman 7 months pregnant, commonsensically, you think, okay, I think something is wrong somewhere, because it's difficult to conceive a situation where a 7 months pregnant, a woman 7 months pregnant will be engaging in carjacking. And what even makes it concerning is that the victim of the carjacking has never, in the course of their identification, indicated that the individual was pregnant. And this woman was visibly pregnant. So if she was the perpetrator, the victim would have actually indicated her state as one of the unique identifying factors. Oh, she was a pregnant woman, but that was not existing. That was not indicated. So in this case, the police officers could have, probably said, okay, there's something wrong. We need to revisit this case. But they never did. They arrested her, locked her up for 11 hours before she was even being released, without any effort to even conduct subsequent investigation to see whether we had the wrong or the right person. So that's one situation, and that's what it's actually making this problematic. Now, when it comes to the use of this technology in Canada, well, all the cases of forced arrest arising from false identification that we have, or documented cases that we have, seems to be coming from our neighbors south of the border, which is in the US. We don't have any particular case in Canada yet. And why is that the case? I can only insinuate, because facial recognition technology was clandestinely used by law enforcement in Canada, right? Until, of course, their secret use of the technology, of course, became subject of journalistic investigation, and then it became public, and everybody was basically, all the police department, they were using this technology, were basically kind of either trying to water down their use of the technology or even deny their use in the first place. So because of the clandestine use of this technology, of course, any police department that is willing to secretly use this technology, you would expect them to be smart enough to also conceal any misuse of the technology, right? So we don't have any documentation as to whether there has been or there was any case of false arrest arising from police department's use of the technology in Canada because the use was secretive. So I'm not going to say that such case never existed. I'm just going to say that it was never documented because the use was clandestine. So police department did use it. Of course, when it became public, that use was kind of scraped off. Everybody kind of, basically they knew what they were doing was wrong. That was where, of course, they now kind of, basically abandoned the technology and then now went back to the drawing board, trying to kind of establish guideline for the use of the technology. And that's what we have now. But one area in Canada where we have clear documentation, although subject to government denial, where we have what seems to be clear documentation of the use of the technology in Canada today, it's in immigration enforcement, especially as it relates to, refugee revocation, where we have seen series of cases at the federal court where individuals who refugee status in Canada is being revoked on the basis of their identity has alleged that the government department, namely IRCC, Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, as well as Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA. So these individuals have basically been alleging that these two government departments were using this technology or use this technology in matching their face to the individuals, other individuals who they are basically claiming to be different, whereas the government departments are basically saying, okay, that's you.
In the response to that, has there been any pushback against the government continuing to use it? Is the government denying its use of these programs? Are they doing anything to ensure that they're either not using them or using them properly?
Well, in the context of refugee revocation, the government departments that have been alleged to be using this technology has neither confirmed nor denied their use of the technology. And we've had 6 or more cases, I think maybe probably 7 cases in Canada so far, where the alleged use of this technology has arisen in the context of refugee revocation. But in all these cases, the government departments, that is IRCC and CBSA, have basically refused to confirm whether they are using the technology or not. I think in the case of Abdul, if I'm not mistaken, Abdul and Canada, the minister alleged that what they used was conventional investigation technique. And what is conventional investigation technique? We don't know. In other cases, what they have done was to rely or seek to rely in the provision of the Privacy Act, I think Section 22 of the Privacy Act, to assert that the technology they use in matching the photographs of the individuals is an investigation technique. Being an investigation technique, it is precluded from disclosure to the public, even in court proceeding. They tried that in Barrie and Canada, and Justice Gore made it very clear to them in that judicial review that no, you are not protected by this particular provision of the Act. And this has consistently come up in all these cases I've mentioned. And in all these 7 cases, there's none of them that either IRCC or CBSA had confirmed their use of the technology. So they either deny the use of, they either seek to assert or cover whatever technology they use in matching the photos by relying on the provision of the Privacy Act. In most cases, the court has often said that disclosure does not protect you from the disclosure. So for now, we don't have clear indication from the government whether they are using this technology or not. What we have is judicial review decisions where judicial review litigation where the allegation has been made. So that is the position of things. And that raises a very serious concern, to me as an individual working in this field, because if you are using the technology, why or what's preventing you from acknowledging the use of the technology in the first place? If you're using the technology and you are certain that this technology it's as effective and accurate as it should be, then you should be, you should have no problem coming to court and say, yeah, we use the technology in matching your face. Here is the technology I've used. This technology has like 99% accuracy rate. So you basically stand by the technology. The only reason why you will seek to hide away from that disclosure is where you have something to hide. Either because the technology sucks, which is the case because there is research out there showing that. But what is even more concerning about these 7 cases, these 7 judicial review cases I have highlighted, which involve 8 individuals, because the case of Barry and Canada involved two black women. So the 7 cases actually involve 8 individuals. All the 8 individuals involved in all these judicial review decisions are individuals from minority communities, basically black people. And this is the same racial group where I have noted earlier, existing research shows that this technology has its worst error rate or worst accuracy rate in identifying individuals from this group. And majority of them are black women. That's not just the racial, but also the gender group where the technology has its worst error rate. So that raises the question then, why should a government department be deploying this technology or the use of this technology in its current state on individuals from this particular racial and gender group?
Just kind of wrapping up here, is there anything else that you would like the general public to understand about AI facial recognition technology and any of its implications, just in a general sense, and maybe the direction that it could be going?
Well, on a positive and not too positive note, maybe probably starting with the positive one and unfortunately ending with the not too positive one, because I think that is the one that should be of greater concern to the general public. On a positive note, facial recognition technology is an amazing technology. The technology will get better, right? That's the positive part. On a negative note, facial recognition technology is just one among many biometric technology. Other biometric technology, of course, being fingerprinting, voice recognition, iris recognition, among the other. But what makes facial recognition different from the other biometric identification technology is that facial recognition technology is the worst among all of them. It is the worst among all of them when it comes to identification, which is unfortunate. And what even makes it more unfortunate, of course, like we have highlighted throughout this podcast, is the fact that it has disproportionate impact on minority communities. So its use in various fields, whether in law enforcement or immigration enforcement, it's a problem for individuals from this community. Already, when it comes to the criminal justice system, individuals from these minority communities, of course, are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system. So when you deploy this technology that has this disproportionate impact, or use it in the criminal justice system with regards to individuals from that racial group, what you're basically doing is basically maintaining the status quo, or if not even worsening the status quo. So basically having a situation where these individuals continue to be disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. So the problem with facial recognition technology is a problem that's out there. It's a problem the general public should know that problem exists. The developers of the technology are aware of this, and they should also continue to work hard to see that the adverse racial impact of this technology on individuals from minority community is addressed, so that we will have a situation where, this technology, that adverse impact, of course, is addressed. So you can safely deploy this technology for public good without imposing a disproportionate impact on individuals from the community that are already disproportionately impacted in many ways.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Professor Christian. We look forward to continuing this discussion next time.
Oh, thank you very much for having me too.
You are listening to the Hearsay podcast. We are proud to present you with legal information, but please remember that this is legal information and not legal advice. If you require legal advice, please consult a lawyer. The Hearsay podcast is a joint project between CJSW 90.9 FM and Pro Bono Students Canada, University of Calgary chapter. If you would like to hear more podcasts like this, the Hearsay Podcast can be found on Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.